As we are to continue, still working on our third order determinants, but this time focusing on the cofactor of an element. So I am to use the previous notes that we had so that we can understand exactly what is a cofactor, because a cofactor, it is found after a minor. You have to determine the minor, then the cofactor. So the cofactor is actually a signed minor, this one. In short, it's a signed, all right, my grammar, all right? It's a signed minor. This is a grammar for maths, guys, all right? A signed minor. What does it mean? It means you have determined the minor of an element. Then that element or that minor that you determined, must be affected by a certain sign, a signed minor. So where is that sign? So it follows that in any third order determinant presentation or in any 3x3 matrix presentation, the matrices of sign, there is a matrix that represents signs of each element as they are A, B, C. We also have signs, matrix of what? Signs. So this one, do not even worry about it. You start with a positive, followed by a negative, and so on. So remember, 3 rows, 3 columns. So it's positive, negative, positive in that manner. So after that, negative. After that, positive, negative. After that, positive, negative. After that, you follow positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, up to the last one. This is a matrix that represents the signs for the third order. As we have these elements A, B, C, D, and so on, it means each element A has to be affected by a positive correspondingly, like that. B by a negative, C by a positive, D by a negative, E by a positive, F by a negative, like that. Each element corresponds to its sign. G to a positive, H to a negative, I there to a positive, like that. So when we say a cofactor is a signed minor, it simply means that, like for an example here, we had to determine the minor of the elements that we are given, the minor of 0, the minor of -5, the minor of 4. So I want to focus where we determined the minor of 4 in this case, all right? There's no need for me to erase. Let me just leave it. Where we focused on the minor of 4. So in our case, the question won't be asking us about the minor, but it will be the cofactor of what? Of 4. So I want to use this same determinant that we had, but focusing now on the cofactor of what? 4. Element 4. So the cofactor of element 4, if already you have determined the minor, because this is our minor here, we are saying the cofactor is what? A signed minor. So it means I must calculate, I must determine the minor of the element. And what is our element? Our element is 4. So you must determine the minor of 4. That minor, you multiply it by the sign which corresponds to this part. So in our case, already we calculated what? The minor of what? The minor of 4, which is this one. But what is the sign now? Because a cofactor is a signed minor. 4 corresponds to which sign? That is the first thing. Sign. Signed minor. So let's check. This is where our 4 is. Here. So it corresponds to which sign? It corresponds to this negative. That is where our 4 is located here. So the sign affecting there is what? A negative. So it means the cofactor of 4 was going to be negative first. You put the sign, a signed minor, minus of what? The minor of 4. So the sign first from here corresponding to that element, 4 corresponds to a negative. But we are saying it is a signed minor. What is our minor? What is the minor of element 4? The minor of element 4, when we calculate it, we obtained a positive 9. So this is our cofactor now. So the cofactor of element 4 was going to be negative 9. But the minor of 4 is what? Positive 9. It does not mean these signs are supposed to change. No, if it was corresponding to a positive, it was not going to change, because a positive and a positive will simply be a positive. But you must indicate the sign to say it was affected by a what? A sign. So if, let's say, we did not calculate the minor of 4 separate, it was just a question on its own, then the question is determine the cofactor of what? The cofactor of 4. You start with the sign where that 4 is, all right? Plus, minus, and so on. The 4 is affected by what? A minus. So the sign first, then you determine the minor of 4. Remember how we determined the minor in our previous class by closing the row and the column where that element is. So you're going back to this stage, 0, 3 minus 3, 7. You calculate your what? Your minor as before, your determinant as before, but knowing that there is a negative sign to affect your answer. 0 times 7 minus 3 times what? Negative 3. Whatever that you're going to have, it is supposed to be what? Affected by this negative. That is where we obtained this positive 9. So it is going to be negative times 9, which is what? Which is negative 9 at the end. So you were to calculate as something that is new. You determine the minor of what? 4. But there I just used the 9 direct because we calculated the minor before. So let's say it's a continuation. Item 1, you're asked to calculate the minor of the element 4. Then the other one, the cofactor of the element 4. There's no need for you to start again doing... just take the answer that you already have on the minor, multiply it to the sign that corresponds to that element, to that number. If it was negative 5, the sign that is corresponding to negative 5 is what? Is a positive from this side. It's a positive. So whatever answer that you're going to obtain for that minor of negative 5, you must multiply it by what? A positive to determine the cofactor of that negative 5. So that's it. A cofactor is from a minor. If you understand that, you're done. A cofactor is from what? A minor. That's why we simply said it's a signed minor. For an example, determine the cofactor, all right, given this. Given this 2, 8, 4, minus 3, 10, 1, 6, 9, 11. Then the question is to determine, all right, the cofactor. Determine the cofactor of element 3, of negative 3. So the cofactor of negative 3 is assigned minor for that. So we are going to say cofactor of what? Negative 3 is equal to, a cofactor is assigned minor. So what is the sign first that corresponds to negative 3? This is where we have negative 3. This is negative 3 here. From the matrices of our signs here, negative 3 corresponds with what? As we can see, it is the same. It lies on the second position. And the sign that we have on the second position is what? A negative. So meaning to say, the cofactor of negative 3 is going to be negative sign first. That corresponds to negative 3. It's what? A negative here according to the matrix of sign. Not according to the negative 3. No, according to here. So this is the sign first that you must put. Then determine the minor of what? Of 3. Because we are saying it's a signed minor, so we must determine the minor of what? Negative 3. So what is the minor now of negative 3? How do you determine the minor? That's where you go back to our previous class. The minor is determined by closing the row and the column where that element is, where minus 3 is. You close the row and the column, then determine the determinant of what is remaining. And what is that we are remaining with? 8, 4, 9, 11 in that order. So this here is our minor. But there is a what? A sign. So that's why we are saying it's a signed minor. So it's sign times minor. You have cofactor, just like that. So this was going to give us what? Negative. You determine the minor, guys, is simply the determinant, just like the previous case that we had. Major diagonal, 8 and what? 8 and 11 minus the minor diagonal, 4 and what? 4 and 9. AD minus BC minus 4 times what? 9. So in simpler terms, or in a simpler way, you have got the cofactor. Once the sign is applied, you have the cofactor. Even if the sign was a positive, indicate the sign that's a positive. Indicate it. Yes, your answer does not matter, but on this part, on this first part, you must indicate, because sometimes maybe the element was corresponding to this one. It's a positive. So it will be positive times whatever that you have there. So you must just indicate the sign, whether it's a positive or what? A negative. But on the answer, do not worry about what? About the sign. All right, so let's evaluate this. 8 and 11, that's 88 minus what? This is going to give us 36. And if we subtract, that was going to give us 52. So that's it. So negative times 52 is going to give us what? Negative 52. So if it was a positive, then there's a 52 like this. Positive times positive is what? It's a positive. You just write 52 as it is. It's not a crime that something is positive, then whatever that you have also is positive. Yes, it can happen that the sign is positive, then the minor, whatever that you're calculating, is a negative. But if it happens that a positive is corresponding with a positive, don't worry. You just write as it is. Ignore the positive on your final answer. So that's a core fact. So I want you to work out as many questions as you can as an individual. All right? As an individual, try to do as many questions as you can. Just try to work out revisions, that is from your question papers and so forth. For an example, let's say they wanted us to determine the cofactor of the element 6. So this one, I want you to do it and finish this one. I'm just going to give you guys a hint. So remember we said a cofactor is what? A signed minor. So cofactor of 6 is going to be what? Where 6 is, what is the sign corresponding to 6? 6 is at the bottom left there. So the sign corresponding is a positive here. So the cofactor of 6, sign first, plus a positive. Then you determine the minor of 6 here. So the sign, then you determine the minor of what? Of 6. What is the minor of 6? It is the determinant that we determine by closing the row and column where that element is. Where 6 is, we close the row and column. So you'll be left with what? What you are left with is your what? Your minor. You are left with 8, 4, 10, 1. So you determine the determinant as usual. All right, let me just finish it. I did not want to finish this one. So it's a plus here, of which a plus does not matter, guys. Then let's determine our determinant 8 versus what? 8 versus 1. 8 times 1 in the major diagonal minus the minor diagonal with what? 4 and what? 4 and 10. 4 and 10. So you can evaluate this part, then whatever that you're going to have as your final answer, you must remember that the sign has to be considered. And in our case, it's a positive, and positive does not affect anything. So whatever that I'm going to have here, that will be 8 minus what? 4 times 10, which is 40. And 8 minus 40, that's what? Negative 32. 8 minus 40, negative what? 32. So you're going to have negative 32. But there's a sign that you are having outside to represent that you are dealing with what? A cofactor. Positive to a negative, that's negative. So we have the cofactor of what? The cofactor of 6. So it's not about the change of sign to say, most of you to say, if I calculate the minor and the minor, if I obtain a negative, it means the cofactor has to change the sign. No, it depends with the sign that is being used corresponding to that element, corresponding to that number 6. What is the sign that is used? As we can see, a plus does not affect, a positive does not affect. If it was a negative, it was going to affect. Negative times negative, it changes, you see. So you work with the sign here. Determine your minor, multiply your answer by the sign, you have the cofactor. It's all about that. So let's do more revisions on that, because this is going to affect us in our next classes, as we shall be focusing mainly on the cofactor to determine the determinant now. You are now determining the determinant of the overall matrix, that is of the third order. The overall determinant of that given matrix. That will be our next class.